Yo, what's checking, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Orange Bloods Texas Football Channel. I'm Jeff Ketchum. That's Anwar Richardson. And today, ladies and gentlemen, the Texas football team begins its summer workouts together as a team.
Hey, y'all.
Do us a solid. Smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel. Help us get to 12,000. We are almost there. And by all means, leave your comments in the comments section as we discuss a lot of different ways to take the conversation on war. But Steve, I think you start with Steve Sarkisian has been talking about the makeover of this team, all of the new additions that he plans on having. And as things currently stand, they're now all officially together. And suddenly this Texas football team, whatever it's going to be in the fall, whatever that is, the pieces that are going to make it that are now together.
Yeah, it's like it's got to be his countdown to Christmas, right? Because even in Christmas, Ketch, in December, he was still talking about getting all these guys together. Talked about it all off season, in the spring. Every conversation, Ketch, it'd be like you ask him about something in the spring, it's like, yeah, can't wait to get all my guys together. So, so to the point where he's like, we're not even going to do a spring game. I just need my guys to get here in the summer. So it's been a time that he's talked about with the, of course, those 6 offensive linemen that I'm sure we'll get into at some point. It's always interesting, Catch, when it comes to the offseason talk and offseason workouts, because, I never try to overcook the grits as it relates to that thing, because we've heard it all. We've heard, and this is where we're going to hear about barbecues and ping pong and summer of ping pong and guys thrown in the street and whose strength and conditioning coach is doing what the others didn't do. Like, that's the entire off season, but nonetheless, we need something to talk about. So here we are.
Yeah, I wonder, the thing that I was thinking about today when I was on orangebloods.com. If you're not on Orange Bloods, shame on you. Don't just mooch off of our free videos. Come see the website and see what the fuss is all about and what got us started in the first place. I was thinking about what are the things that have to get done now in the next 2 months before this team gets together. One of them is clearly take the young offensive linemen and integrate them inside the team and get them as comfortable as possible, because it can't be stressed enough how important this incoming offensive line class will be, not just to the program. I mean, it's one thing to say this is the greatest offensive line class that the University of Texas has ever signed. This might help them in 2024 and 2025, compete in the – no. They need those dudes now. Correct. And so there's no time like the present to start making that acclimation process as smooth as possible, because if that group doesn't help this team this season, the consequences could be dire. And I don't think there's going to be a lot of people who want to hear any excuses about it.
Yeah, I mean, Catch, I think you're 100% correct, because, especially when you start talking about the offseason acquisitions, when he starts talking about 30-something new faces, 35, 36, whatever that number finally is, or is going to eventually sit at, people start thinking, okay, this is Steve, this is your team. Like, this is, I think you get the pass in year one, and you could say, okay, well, that's a Tom Herman team, and da-da-da-da-da, like, that's okay. But now people are going to say, no, these are your guys. This is who you're here to coach them up. And you've got to get this program in a better place than it was, obviously, in 2022. So, it becomes important to make sure that everything that needs to be accomplished for this to be a successful season as they start. I think you framed this as phase 4, summer conditioning is phase 3. I think training camp becomes phase 4, the season becomes phase 5. To your point, it's getting all those guys. It's going to be the offensive linemen up to speed. It's got to be, getting some sort of connection, obviously, with Quinn and all these the receivers who are there, the new guys that they've got in. They got a new linebacker. He's talked about wanting to have, the linebacker depth in the room. Like, you got to get him ready to go on this level as well. So, absolutely, Catch, very, very important, to your point, to eliminate any excuses in the upcoming year.
Is there anything that you can hear in the next 2 months that matters, right? So to be fair, it was at about this point last year when people started to say, yo, Xavier Worthy is one of the best players in the program now, right? And so, it was one of the reasons why we signed him to an NIL deal is there was a buzz about how he had looked in the summer, and sure enough, he shows up in the summer, and almost from day one in practices, he was already a starter. Is there anything that we can hear in the next 2 months with the offensive lineman that really matters, given that it's not real football that they will, you know what I mean? What Xavier Worthy does as a receiver is a little closer to what it is that he'll do during the season and on the field that I think shirts and shorts and blocking drills for offensive linemen. If we start to hear that Kelvin Banks or DJ Campbell are blowing it up, like what does that do for your anticipation meter? How skeptic are you of getting overhyped on big dudes who aren't in pads?
It's a tough one, and it's a great question. You know why, Ketch? Because last year we had two things that occurred, right? We kept hearing that the defensive line was having the better of the offensive line, especially throughout training camp, right? And so we thought your thought process was, well, man, that must mean the defensive line is going to be really good this upcoming season. And come to find out, that meant nothing, right? Because the offensive line struggled throughout most of last year, and the defensive line struggled most throughout last year. So, I don't know, Ketch, if I hear something as a unit, I will get overhyped or excited about it. Now, if you tell me certain individuals are on that offensive line, because of the 6 freshmen, what do you say, Ketch? They need 2 to pop, right? I mean, is that?
I think they need 1 to show up and be better than good right away, because left tackle is not an answered question for this team. And if we took this to the pros, Anwar, if we were talking about a pro team getting ready to go into training camp and it didn't know for sure who its left tackle was going to be, it'd be hard to have a conversation about that team being any good, period. It is one of the top 2 or 3, you're talking quarterback, left tackle, and your number 1 pass rusher. Those are probably the 3 most important positions in football. That position is so unsettled, and maybe leaning on a freshman to fill it. Boy, if we get to August and there's not a sense that, boy, Kelvin Banks is going to, you know what I mean? Like if we're not buzzing about somebody, it feels like an kind of a moment. So it's almost, I wonder if we're going to talk ourselves into a lot of the stuff that we'll say, maybe because we're thirsty and we just want to hear new things. I don't know. Like I'm trying to remember back to how skeptical we were of Xavier Worthy from a year ago and what it would sound like if one of these offensive linemen is popping like that from offseason reports. Our sources telling us that, this guy looks like he's ready. That's the first step. I think there's a little bit of cynicism in my head about what to expect of these guys so early, but it's so important that you almost feel like there better be some buzz, because if there's not, I don't know what that indicates going into the season and how problematic that really is. We talk about all of the sensational skill talent that this team has. What does it mean to an offense if you are just okay at best at the most important position on the line? I don't know how to quantify that.
No, I think, again, Ketch, I don't know. This might be the 3rd time I've said this. You have a really great point. So whatever you ate this morning, Ketch, I mean, it is working, because when you start thinking about, you talked about the 2 important positions, the left tackle and the quarterback, right? Well, somebody's got to protect Quinn Ewers. Like we can't ignore that. As talented as he is, he's still a young quarterback, and he's still going to need time to throw the ball. Like, to your point, it's great to have all these weapons. It's great. It looks like a nice fantasy football team, right? But at some point, if he's going 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, and they're on his ass, that's going to be a problem for him going forward. So, this is where, when you look at the Kelvin Banks of the world, or Devin Campbell, like you got to have one, that lives up to it, the high rankings, all those kind of things, because
immediately.
Yes, because Texas has been in kind of a, you've had the anomalies of guys who've, been able to go pro, but if you've said like, have they had a great, super talented offensive line? It's probably been a while, Ketch. You would have to tell me when you thought the last great Texas offensive line was.
2006.
What time? When was it?
2006.
It's a long time ago.
Those dudes have kids getting ready to graduate from like high school now. It has been a while. And I think we can't, it feels like that hammer hit that nail. Like that was like the moment of this show. The realization of, boy, we have this conversation a lot every year. This has to be the beginning of the end of that conversation. Real quick, I want to remind everybody that this video brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. I totally forgot to do that. Our partners, the sponsor of this show today, they will match up to 100%, like up to $100 of your first deposit if you go over there, use the Orange Bloods password, get in on Underdog, whether it's daily or seasonal. They've got all of the stuff that you love and you crave and that you want to participate in. Check them out. It's also probably, Anwar, a decent time to segue. You mentioned Quinn Ewers. To me, offensive line is one of the top three things. I don't know that it's actually more important than the idea that Quinn Ewers over the course of the next 2 months continues to just develop and find comfort. And, Tariq Milton is a new player. Ajay Hall is a new player that he's never really done drills with before. And before this season is over with, they might just be important players. Brennan Thompson, that's three guys right now that I think are probably in your top 6 wide receivers. And none of the Texas quarterbacks have really ever thrown a football to those guys before. So there's a lot. We talked the quarterback position. It could be Hudson Card. It could be Malik Murphy. But we know it's really a Quinn Ewers conversation. And, oh, by the way, Isaiah Nayor, he's new to the program, so all of these guys are still fairly new for Ewers. But Nayor's a guy that also just joined the program in the fall. 3 other incoming receivers that he's got to build a rapport for. I think that very quietly, there's never been a quarterback battle. How many of those have you and I covered together? And we already feel like we have our answer. And it really does feel like it's critically important that of everybody on campus, Quinn Ewers is the one that starts to develop a rapport with some of these guys.
Well, and don't forget, Ketch, when you talk about some of the guys that he has to develop the rapport with, he's got 2 guys that are injured that will be back at some point with Troy O'Meary and Jaden Alexis. So now you're talking, 5, 6, new guys that he's going to have to, throw to that he never really had the opportunity to. So it becomes very important for his development because, you're right. We've covered a lot of quarterback battles, but this one seems to be the one, to the point where, Ketch, my question to you was in the summer and even training camp, does he just need to, does Sark just say, I got to go all in. I can't worry about divvying up reps. I've got to go all in on Quinn and make sure that guy is ready, as opposed to let me do this battle thing and then see what happens.
Well, the coaches are more involved this summer than they really have ever been in the past. And if they want to do such a thing, I think they'll have the ability to do so. Whereas before it felt like you just had to wait till August. I think they'll wait till August, and maybe even if they don't tell us, I think we will obviously start to see Quinn Ewers take the lion's share of the reps. And I think what makes this year different than last year with the Casey Thompson Hudson Card. I always felt like Hudson Card was going to win that battle. It kind of played out exactly like I thought it would. But the elephant in the room was, look, man, Casey Thompson doesn't have to stay, right? I mean, that was a guy that even in August was like, I don't have to use a year of eligibility. I can go somewhere else and have options. Hudson Card also has options, but it seems pretty clear that he's going to graduate first. He's going to make it through at least this semester. So if you're Sark, you don't have to placate Hudson Card the way you went out of your way to placate Casey Thompson. And look, in the end, Casey Thompson ended up being the better quarterback between the two last year, right? Like, so however you want to think about what placating meant and the leverage that Thompson had in the locker room with regards to, I can just leave. And then what are you going to do if you only have one quarterback? I think that he can just make a quarterback decision. I think Hudson Card realizes I'm going to get a shot. I think the Hudson Card camp, after going through what they went through a year ago and knowing that this offensive line is still this offensive line, I think they're thinking to themselves, just like a year ago, it might not even matter who wins the starting quarterback job. Yeah. Both guys are eventually going to get to play. And, I think Hudson Card feels like it's my job to ball out when I get that opportunity. And kind of the same thing with Quinn Ewers, assuming, like we all do, that he's going to be the starting quarterback. It's important that he do what Hudson Card didn't do a year ago, which is stub his – boy, that Alabama game in week 2, there's a lot of ways to look at that. But in week 1, Hudson Card had the best opening day quarterback performance of the last 20 years. I know. I wrote an article about it. And then the next week he lost his job, and like Steve Sarkisian was mentally done with him forever. Quinn Ewers doesn't have that hanging over his head. But the big test of the early part of the season is in week 2, just like it was a year ago. It is against an SEC team that physically can give you some real problems. And, I think part of that, again, is why Hudson Card is comfortable with where he's at. He's going to be able to graduate. But if you're Sark, you can put a little extra into Quinn without wondering how the backup feels in a way that you just weren't able to do a year ago. And I think that will mean a lot for this team and this program, because rather than making guys happy, they got to make this position and this offense good. And it, in retrospect, when we look back towards the end of August, Anwar, it felt like it wasn't a good enough offense yet. But boy, the quarterbacks, they made sure to make those guys happy. And then 5 months later, neither of those guys that they wanted to make happy, they even care about making happy anymore. So I really think you just got to do what's best for your team. And it's the best thing that this team has going for them is that they don't have to, I think, worry about Hudson Card bailing in the next 3 months if he loses the job. And it just provides some stability in a couple of different ways that this program really needs after last season.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that Sarkisian has to do this year, Ketch, that he didn't do last year, was he has to get it right when it comes to the quarterback situation. So, he got it wrong, last year, and he realized that, after Arkansas game, to the point, to your point, Ketch, never looked back. It was like he got cheated on, and he was like, I packed my stuff up, and I'll see you in divorce court, because that's it.
There are some people, Anwar, that you just don't cheat on. Yeah. That, like, if you look at another person sideways, they're like, oh, well, we're done. if I'm not enough for you, Sarkisian is one of those dudes, man. If he feels like it's you've accidentally kissed someone else, he's going to see you in divorce court.
Yeah, 100%. So he has to. So he has to. So, and then one thing he can't do this year, Ketch, he can't start Quinn and then bench him, for so many reasons, but you can't look back. Once you put Quinn in, that's your guy. Like that is your guy. That's your high recruit. That's the guy you have to work it out with. Like, no one's going to want to see Hudson Card playing and when they've got Quinn right there, unless Quinn just struggles and it just looks horrible, which I don't necessarily foresee happening. So, he's got to make sure this offseason that Quinn is up to speed, that he uses the time in the summer to work with him, get him ready, like we said for week 2. And gosh, just quick sidebar. You know how I felt. I write about it every year. I'll probably write about it in sometime in the summer. That off-season schedules, they've just got to stop scheduling killers. Like, there's no need to do this anymore when you're in the SEC. I understood, once they got out, Texas A&M wasn't there. How do we, make this thing attractive? So they were scheduling all these tough teams. No more. The Chris Delcani, no more. It needs to be Mother Mary of the Blind, Sisters of the One Leg, all of that, because Texas needs to just get off to a good start. And having, I think I've done the math. The last time they were undefeated to start the season, it was so many years ago. But nonetheless, it's just my sidebar when I start thinking about Alabama. I'm like, why? Just you would say get rid of it. Get him off the schedule. But yet just getting Quinn ready for not only what he's going to face in week 2, but then make sure he's mentally ready, for that game, and then what needs to occur past that.
We're going to wrap this up in just a second, and there's one more position that I wanted to talk about briefly before we do. I just want to sidebar. How different would you feel about this entire season and team if Alabama was replaced on the schedule with Rice?
Well, I'd feel a lot different, because I would feel like Texas would actually be able to get some momentum going, which is something they've never been able to do. And that, Oklahoma has done that. Oklahoma doesn't go out and they've very rarely have they put killers within the first 3 games. So I would feel much different. I'd say, okay, they got a chance to start off 3-0 and then get some momentum before they open up with Tech.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like with Alabama, and again, I don't want to sidetrack us too much, but it's part of the conversation that we're having. It's like you have to survive Alabama with Humpty Dumpty not breaking completely apart. Whereas if that game wasn't on the schedule, you'd just be talking about building momentum and guys learning in September to play together and trying to get better. That Alabama game, I don't know. It looms as just an ominous cloud for the entire season. And who knows, they might play so well in Alabama that it works as a springboard, but you won't know until after that game is over. And until it is, the memories of Arkansas and what lingered from that just is hard to escape.
Ketch, it's like boxing. You like boxing, I like boxing.
Yeah.
I know you watch the UFC and stuff. Your second fight is not against a guy who is 12-0. You're not fighting a champion. You're not going against a guy who's 25-0. You're not going against 30-1, right? There's a build-up to the building up your career. That's why I'm saying there needs to be more of a build-up, especially when you get in the SEC. You already got the tough games in the SEC. If I'm looking at whenever Michigan is and Florida's already there, but anything futuristically that I feel like there's a team with a mega pulse, I'm pulling that from the schedule. Sorry.
It just reminds me that a couple of months ago, I had a hot take on a Monday overreaction that Texas needed by any means necessary to pull out of the game and have the SEC help them do it. You thought I was crazy, but all these months later, I still kind of feel like that would have been in the best interest of everybody, but that's neither here nor there. Last position in this summer workout starting today. What needs to happen? One of those freshman defensive lineman, edge rusher types needs to just get themselves in the fray, right? So Justice Finkley is one, and it didn't really happen in spring workouts where he was running with the first team, and it felt like, that concern can be eased up a little bit because we know that this guy's going to contribute where we didn't know that a year ago. Jamon Tapp, one of these guys has to put themselves in the competition with like an Ovio Gofu for instant impact. And I feel like if that's going to happen in August and September, it needs to start happening in June and July.
Yes, I mean, 100%, because like we started talking about, there's questions on the offensive line, but we can't ignore the inability to generate a pass rush, last year, and how that affected the team and their inability to get off the field. So I would absolutely agree with you. Like, I don't know who those people are. Obviously Finkley's been on the campus, longer, but needing that, and Ketch is probably, unlike offensive linemen, defensive line, you think you could probably come in and contribute a little bit faster, wouldn't you say, if you're a standout defensive lineman as opposed to an offensive lineman?
Yeah, because they don't need a 3-down player. They really need somebody on 3rd down, on obvious passing downs. You don't have to do anything but get to the quarterback. And, it helps if – think about Will Anderson a year ago at Alabama. I mean, that guy's a phenomenal player. But at the end of the day, they can put him on an edge and say, you don't need to have a lot of moves. You'll get that. We're going to teach you that. Sophomore and junior year, we're going to teach you all kinds of pass rush stuff that's going to help you be a pro. But at this level, if you're quick and you're explosive and you can get around a tackle, that means a lot. And that is what Texas lacks. And so much so, Anwar, that we're a couple of months out and there's still a lot of conversation about what exactly is the Texas-based defense going to look like. There's a lot of conversation about especially when they added DeMonte Tucker Dorsey. Does this mean that they could go to like a 3-3 stack defense where, you're changing your scheme to some degree completely because of what you don't have? And the elephant in the room is there's no good defense. There's no good formation, not 3-3, not 4-3, not 3-4, none of it. If you don't have a guy that can't get to the quarterback, you can try to hide that and mask it to whatever ability that you want to, but you're still missing that thing. Texas is still missing that thing unless somebody that just showed up on campus can be that guy, at least to some degree, to build a bridge to maybe next season when that position is just a little bit more juiced up, has a little bit more firepower to it. But until today, when guys are starting, in practice, there really isn't any difference between what Texas had on the field a year ago versus what it has on the field during the spring, outside of a young Justice Finkley and the guys that are gone. So no Ben Davis, no Ray Thornton. Whatever those guys weren't, they played a lot last season. And the guys that were already here weren't good enough a year ago to beat those dudes out. So it's just a question mark, along with, I think, the offensive line that hovers over this team going into this season, and what happens in the next couple of months before they ever put pads on in August is, I think, going to mean a lot in terms of who they can expect to help out right away as soon as week 2 against Alabama. Anwar, before I wrap things up, any parting shot?
Nah,
You're just trying to finish the video.
I got a soon to be 4-year-old that's annoying.
I totally get it. Look, again, Underdog Fantasy, the best in fantasy. They will match up to $100, 100% of your first $100. They just want to give you $100, basically. Check them out, whether it's daily, seasonal. They got all of your fantasy needs covered. Leave your comments in the comments section if you're new to the channel. Subscribe, like us, help us out. We're creeping up towards the football season. We want to create new goals besides getting to 12,000 subscribers. For myself and soon to be vacationing, Anwar Richardson.
Yes,
soon.
sir.
We'll talk to you later. Take care of each other.